specialists from other disciplines. Today, our panelists come to us with expertise in philosophy and economics, with industrial organizational psychology, physical therapy, computer science, finance. Now, it's rare to have a group of such people talking together at SLU or at any research university, except perhaps when they're on a committee complaining about parking policy. The new pope has pointed to the importance of the artificial intelligence technologies. Of course, a lot of people are talking about AI, and everyone seems to have an angle. Usually it's concerned with power or money. The Vatican is one of the few places calling for us to have thoughtful, sustained discussions about the social impact of AI. It seems fitting that SLU's Catholic Studies Center should host this panel series. I'm grateful to Dean Randy Rosenberg for his support. Now, each person in our panel has a long list of impressive accomplishments as classroom teachers in SLU, as researchers, as people who have worked with SLU's administration in various roles, as people who have shared their gifts with the community beyond SLU. Now, if I were to give each of them the sort of introductions that their expertise and accomplishments deserve, it would take our entire time. We'll proceed as follows. Each panelist will begin by briefly introducing themselves, stating his or her name, their department, or their role at SLU, and then sharing with us a short reflection, using as a springboard a Vatican document recommended by the new Pope, Antiqua et Nova. It's subtitled, A Note on the Relationship Between Artificial Intelligence and Human Intelligence. After the 6 short presentations, we should have time for questions and conversation and then refreshments. Now, this weekend, we'll celebrate Labor Day. So it's fitting that we should launch this Pope Leo series on artificial intelligence with a conversation about the impact of AI on the world of work. 1 year ago this weekend, my father passed away. During the 93 years that he walked this earth, he lived through transformation from the old agricultural economy to the modern industrial economy and the postmodern information economy. My father grew up in southern Illinois, where my grandparents lived in what was called a pumper shack near the Wabash River, about 40 miles southwest of Terre Haute, on land owned by the Peabody Energy Company. Now, today, Peabody's headquarters is in downtown St. Louis. My father's family had 2 horses, which his father used to power a Peabody oil drill. The horses walked in circles, powering this pump. From this work, my grandfather was paid in scrip, company money, good only at the company store. In exchange, the family was allowed to plant and forage, gardening, gathering edibles, harvesting crops on the land near their pumping machine. Each year they planted a large garden from which they got much of the food that they ate. They had chickens and cows for eggs and milk. When my father was 5 years old, the family moved to a home in town. And that was the first time that my father lived with electricity and with running water. In school, my father was a very good student. He ultimately attended the University of Illinois, where he studied industrial engineering. He became an expert in industrial efficiency. At work, his main tool was a slide rule, until later he was trained how to use a computer. When he retired in the early 1990s, he was vice president of industrial engineering for a railroad in Chicago that served the area's steel mills. When I was in high school in the 1970s, my father discerned a vocation to become ordained a deacon in the Catholic Church. He was in the group of the first lay Catholics who were ordained after the Second Vatican Council. After I completed my graduate studies and joined the faculty here at SLU, my father retired from his job as an industrial engineer, and then he went back to school to learn how to become a hospital chaplain. He worked as a chaplain and also as the deacon of the Mission Church for almost 30 years. His work as a chaplain involved accompanying people in hospice through the final months and weeks and days of their lives, working with families as they deal with difficult emotions while helping people prepare for the coming of death. He retired from this work just a few years ago when he turned 90. I tell this story both to honor my father, who, as I say, passed away 1 year ago this weekend, and to help us reflect on various kinds of work, the various kinds of tools and machines used in that work, the tools used in the garden, the oil, the locomotive engine, the slide rule my father used with expertise before industrial engineers took to doing their work on computers, and the sophisticated medical equipment and devices used in the hospital settings where my father worked as a hospital chaplain from the early 1990s until just a few years ago. In telling this story, I want to bring into focus one of the central points made in the document Antiqua et Nova. Artificial intelligence is a tool, but unlike the garden shovel or the oil drill or the locomotive, which are tools that extend the strength of the human body, AI is a tool for extending our ability to accomplish tasks typically associated with the human intellect. As Antiqua et Nova puts it, between a machine and a human being, only the latter is truly a moral agent, a subject of moral responsibility, who exercises freedom in his or her decisions. Only the human can be sufficiently self-aware to the point of listening and following the voice of conscience, discerning with prudence, and seeking the good that is possible in every situation. Thank you for your attention. I trust that each of the panelists will help stir our consciences while helping us discern prudently as we seek the good. Father David.
Thank you. My name is Father David Kiblinger. I am a PhD student in the philosophy department, and I am writing on Pope Francis and Catholic social teaching. And so my remarks will be more kind of related and conceptual to, on the conceptual level, to themes in Catholic social teaching. I will begin by recalling a set of claims made by Pope John Paul II in his 1981 encyclical on human work, Laborem Exercens. He says, "Work is one of the characteristics that distinguish the human being from the rest of creatures. Only human beings are capable of work, and only human beings work." I believe these claims about the unique nature of humans, our ability to work, and our vocation to work must form the basis of our own thinking about AI and work. An immediate consequence of these claims is that AI simply does not do work. It is not even capable of doing work. The strong assertion that AI cannot do work may strike us as silly or naive. The motivation, of course, for much AI research seems to be to develop systems that can do our work for us more efficiently and effectively. Beyond the contributions AI is making in complex diagnostic and computational fields, AI promises to perform a host of mundane and repetitive tasks that humans have little desire to do. AI certainly appears to work, and the claim to the contrary seems obviously wrong. The strangeness of the claim that AI is incapable of work invites us to reflect further on the nature of work according to Catholic social teaching. Work itself is a concept whose definition must be specified. For example, in physics, there's a definition of work. In physics, work is defined as force times the distance over which that force is applied to an object, or W equals F times D. This meaning of work does not apply in all contexts in which the word work is used. So what is the meaning of work in Catholic social teaching? John Paul II began his reflection on human work in Laborem Exercens, meditating on God's commandment to Adam and Eve to subdue the earth, Genesis 1:28. This call to subdue the earth, to make the earth a fitting home for human beings, is directly connected with the creation of humanity in the image and likeness of God, the verse before. Just as God is the free and creative source of all being, human beings have the duty to exercise our freedom and creativity to produce all that is needed for our life and fulfillment. What I understand to be the key insight into work from Catholic social teaching could be stated: the most important product of my work is myself. By working well, I become a person, growing ever more in the image of God. The external product of my work, whether it be a paper for class, a computer program, or a table and chairs, is of secondary importance to who I am becoming through my work. John Paul II gave us a helpful distinction in writing about the objective and the subjective dimensions of work. The subjective dimension of work is always preeminent over the objective dimension of work. In work, my realizing the image of God in which I was created is more important than anything I create outside of myself. Thus, from the viewpoint of Catholic social teaching, work means any activity in which I fulfill my nature as a person created in God's image by providing for human needs and creating a dignified life for myself and others on this earth. The basic reason why AI is incapable of doing work is that it does not have a personal nature to fulfill. It cannot develop itself in true freedom and creativity. AI will become a problem for humanity if it impairs our own ability to work. Almost 100 years ago, Pope Pius XI wrote in Quadragesimo Anno, "Dead matter comes forth from the factory ennobled, while men there are corrupted and degraded." In Laborum Exerciens, Pope John Paul II echoed this anxiety, that in work, matter gains in nobility, while human beings experience a lowering of their own dignity. I suggest we could take these warnings as a guiding principle for our own engagement in AI. We must be careful not to dignify matter at the expense of that human dignity achieved through work. A robust understanding of human dignity must be our guiding principle in moving forward in AI. To end my remarks, I wish to highlight one way Antiqua et Nova, through the inspiration of Pope Francis, adds to a robust understanding of human dignity. In many of his writings, Pope Francis drew attention to the fact that belonging to a people is part of human dignity. I am trying to work out what he means by this claim in my own research. Already, though, he has offered a corrective to my own thinking. I typically conceive of human dignity in more individualistic terms. It is about my developing my own capacities for thought and action, moral responsibility and freedom. Pope Francis could be said to expand human dignity to include the dignity of peoples. He is against the trend of creating a global monoculture where everyone thinks the same and is the same. Antiqua et Nova raises the question of whether turning problem solving and decision making over to AI will reduce the diversity of cultures and ways of proceeding in the world. The document says, quote, "It should be stressed that digital realities, not restricted by any spatial bonds, tend to be more homogeneous and impersonal than communities rooted in a particular place in a specific history, with a common journey characterized by shared values and hopes, but also by inevitable disagreements and divergences. Turning over the economy and finance entirely to digital technology would reduce this variety and richness," end quote. Reducing modes of thinking rooted in the different peoples of the world to a single rationality of a super AI may promise to reduce our many disagreements. Yet in reality, such a reduction represents a danger to human dignity. Our shared interactions and even our disagreements forms us as persons capable of healthy relationships, self-expression, and self-giving within a historically constituted people. I believe one of our present challenges in Catholic social thought is to expand this understanding of the historical, communal dimension of human dignity in Pope Francis's writings. My hope is that Pope Leo can lead the way in our thinking, and my prayer is that the trajectory of AI will lead to an ennobling of ourselves, our work, and our peoples.
Well played, good sir. Very well played. My name is Bonnie Wilson. I actually no longer have an affiliation with SLU, but for many years I was a member of the Department of Economics. And Greg, I thank you for this invitation. Greg, do you remember the first time you invited me to speak at one of these?
I have to confess I don't, Bonnie.
I will confess I also had to look it up. I believe it was in 2013.
Okay.
And it was the logic of gift and the logic of markets.
Oh.
So it was on In Caritas in Veritate, and I think that was probably the very first occasion I ever had to read an encyclical. And I counted, as a result of collaborations with Greg, roughly between 2013 and 2019, I believe I had occasion to read at least 8 more. So Greg, you're a good evangelist. What struck me most about that experience collaborating with Greg and bringing my work as an economist into contact with Catholic social thought is the common threads and shared ideas that run through the discipline of economics and the body of Catholic doctrine and reflection on social life that are Catholic social thought. So today, as we think about AI in the world of work, I'd like to highlight a few of those common threads and shared ideas about technology first. And then I'd like to highlight a metaphor for thinking about society that the discipline of economics and Catholic social thought share. And finally, I'd like to offer a critique of that metaphor. I have, in fact, quite recently, maybe only when thinking about this panel today, decided that that metaphor is actually deeply flawed. And I think if we correct it, it can point us in the direction we need to go to address a number of the concerns we're grappling with in our age of modernity, including potential challenges with the relationship between artificial intelligence and human intelligence. So first, a few remarks about technology. So we see in the note that Greg shared with us that Catholic social thought celebrates the gifts that are our scientific and technological abilities. An economic perspective is also very pro-technology. For most of our existence as human beings, we have been poor. Every single one of us dirt poor. But roughly 200 years ago, that changed. In just the past 200 years, and you hear this in the remarks that Greg gave earlier, much of humanity, including every single one of us, has gotten wildly rich. It is extraordinary. It is awesome. And economics teaches us that technology is the source of not all, but most of that material prosperity. We also see in the note that Greg shared with us concern raised by Catholic social thought that AI may relegate workers to rigid and repetitive tasks. None other than Adam Smith himself shared this worry about the technology of his day. He wrote that technology might cause the mental mutilation of workers. And this is a real worry with AI, not just an imagined one. We already have evidence of the deleterious impact AI can have on critical thinking, which is a very important way, at least some of us think, we exercise our humanity. Adam Smith suggested remedies for this problem with education for everybody, not for engagement in the world of work, but so that we would each have a life of the mind that we would use outside of that world of work. We also see in the note Greg shared with us concern raised by Catholic social thought that, quote, if AI is used to replace human workers, there is substantial risk of disproportionate benefit for the few at the price of the impoverishment of many. Of course, none other than John Maynard Keynes likewise 15-hour work week. If anybody out there has figured that out, I hope you please come see me. Yeah. So, Keynes seems to have gotten wrong. I actually think there's good reason to be skeptical that AI will be different. But I may be wrong, and it's worth very much worrying about that. AI may well indeed advance sufficiently quickly that the world of work will be severely disrupted, possibly for a significant period of time, and causing many to struggle economically and financially, not to mention morally and psychologically. Economist Daron Acemoglu, who won last year's Nobel Prize in economics, has been thinking about this a lot and has been arguing that AI is heading very much in the wrong direction for workers